Alright, welcome back to Nikolai. This comic according to classic less non-classic. It's episode number 1481, episode number 1375. Now, like I mentioned in the last video, these two are discussing a series of issues that, for the trades, I was not able to get. So, reviewing the individual issues of them. First up, it is Invincible Iron Man. Yep, I'm covering from this particular series issues 504 to 509. Why these issues, might ask? Because it's a Fear Itself tie-in. Now, the first portion of this tie-in is Iron Man going to Paris to investigate like stuff in Paris. Like he's there just to check out stuff for Stark Reliant. And he's there, and he gets there like, oh, people have been turned to stone. But who did this? None other than a hammer-possessed Grey Gargoyle. Yes, he is an Iron Man villain, Grey Gargoyle. Yeah, he actually got that way because of an experiment he did himself. So basically, as a side thing, we have Pepper just investigating some crash. And we also have, and the main plot is simply Iron Man versus the Grey Gargoyle. And like one area he ends up in basically are pieces, like pieces of people who are smashed by, of course, by the Grey Gargoyle. And throughout this first half of these set of issues, it's like I said, the main plot is Iron Man versus Grey Gargoyle. Yep, and he fights him. There's also a flashback to some other person he was working with, and of course you have Iron Man continuing this fight with him, and of course Pepper investigating like other stuff. Yeah, then during the fight, Detroit Steel shows up. Yes, he's a character Matt created, I believe, at the a few stories back when they first created Stark Reliant. You see, Detroit Steel, his real name is Doug Johnson III, and he briefly fights the Grey Gargoyle, and then he's turned to stone, presumably killed. Yes, he's presumably killed by the Grey Gargoyle. Yeah, it's later retcon after the story. He actually survived that somehow. Yep, and then pretty much right after, of all people, after the Grey Gargoyle was defeated, this takes the first couple issues, they try to deal with somewhat of the aftermath-ish. And then we get into the other stuff related to Fear itself, like Iron Man creating his own armor based upon Asgard metals, which also leads to him getting drunk during Fear itself. Oh yes, definitely it does. Pepper, of course, does her own thing. Tony talks to dwarves, which is basically a sort of expansion of what happened in Fear itself. Basically how Tony Stark convinced the dwarves working to make this armor. It's basically just an expansion on it. That's mainly what the last few issues are. And then of course, the Grey Gargoyle is still around. And of course, I go drinking. Now, I should point out, though, all the issues in here are drawn by Saba LaRocca. Yep. Aside from the drinking thing, and of course they deal with half of Fear number 3, we had the apparent death of Bucky Barnes, where he got killed by the female Red Skull. Though he survived, no problem. Yep. Of course, Drago goes on a rampage. Pepper gets attacked by a bunch of like destroyed steel type armors. Yep. Pepper, of course, fights them off, and then the Grey Gargoyle shows up to fight. And then we see this weird Hulkling creature. Oh yeah, by the way, these things are made by Hammer. Yeah, the company that was originally founded by Justin Hammer. I believe the current owner is Justine and her daughter Sasha Hammer. Yep. Then, of course, the Hammer Mechs are attacked by the Grey Gargoyle. Tony, of course, basically builds his. Well, I think it's swallowed up by some goo. And then we continue in 508. Where he actually survives the goo stuff. Meanwhile, we can continue with the whole thing with Pepper versus the Grey Gargoyle. Yeah, in case you're curious though, Pepper's never fought the Grey Gargoyle before. Iron Man's fought more times than she has. And if like Iron Man needs more powerful armor, Pepper of course gets briefly taken. She gets grabbed by, of course, Grey Gargoyle and gets her helmet ripped off by him. Yep. And it looks like Grey Gargoyle is probably going to kill her. And of course, they continue to build, and then we have the dwarves and Iron Man building the special Iron Man armor, which shows up at the very next issue, and I believe plays a role in actually in the finale for Fear itself, where he basically makes this armor right here. Yep, this is the Asgardian armor. I believe this is the only he ever made. He just wears just this one issue here, and he wears Fear itself, and that's it. Yep. Of course, then we have the Grey Gargoyle apparently fighting, looks like the god of war, Tyre, who takes away his hammer. Iron Man creates his new armor. And, of course, they deal with some aftermath stuff. And, of course, Pepper's in Italy. Can't speak, well, whatever Italian that is. And, of course, she has to write back with them. And of course, Justine Hammer basically just, well, chastises everybody else. And then Iron Man shows up with the Asgardians to team up with the Avengers. Of course, the Avengers here are basically Red Hulk, Betty Ross, who's Red She-Hulk, Spider-Man, the Carol Danvers Miss Marvel, Hawkeye, Wolverine, and the Jessica Drew Spider-Woman. Yep. And, well, that's it. Yeah, the main aftermath is dealt with in Fear itself, Iron Man. Which I believe is probably collecting that. I would think it would probably collecting this book here. I'm going to take a quick look at it here. And yes, it is done by it's basically this aftermath issue, where Tony deals with people turning to stone, and of course him trying to restore everything back to normal. And of course he has to give up his armor that he built. He gets a fight with Odin about it. Yep, and that's basically what it is. Him get back his armor. And then pretty much everything is kind of restored to everything the way it was. As in the case of the Fear Itself tie-in issues, I thought they're pretty good. This issue here, Fear Itself 7.3, is actually a pretty good issue. Yeah, and it's great though the fact this actually is written by the current creative team of Iron Man. Yep. So I give Fear Itself Iron Man. That's the whole thing with Fear Itself. I give that I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. It's actually pretty good. Next up it is, if I can find the thing here. Hang on. That's one that's kind of surprising because I haven't done this character for a little while. We have... I have to get the right thing here. We have Deadpool. Yes, this comes from the third volume for the series. Issues 29 to 34. What's so special about these issues? They're the original Sin tie-in. Yeah, in these issues, Deadpool finds this little girl who possibly might be related to him. And this little girl is actually Eleanor, is the mother of this little girl. Now, the first issue, of course, is done by Brian Pusen and Gerry Duggan. Brian Pusen co-wrote a lot of Gerry Duggan's issues. Excuse me. Not really sure why, though, but yes, so after it happened at the previous story arc where basically Deadpool got married, he basically teams up with his beautiful wife to basically deal with other things, basically other monsters. And of course, we have where Eleanor herself, who actually is now in the body of L&D Robot. There's a funny joke Deadpool plays in here. Finds Bruce Banner's office, turns the thing up, writes men's room on there, and of course the guy gets chastised for it. Then he just walks by, and he comes across the room occupied by Dazzler. Yes, Dazzler's the agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., and, well, this sets up something with them in this story arc. Yep, basically chastises for one, of course he thinks the intruder. Oh yeah, and this Dazzler is not the actual Dazzler. Oh no. This is Mystique. Yes, Mystique. That led into the X-Men vs. S.H.I.E.L.D. storyline. Yep, where... And apparently, Eleanor and Scott Astin was actually there for the Truth Bomb incident back in issue 2 of Original Sin. Where she finds out, though, she had another child. The child's father is frickin' Deadpool. Of course, Deadpool does know that a little bit later. And then we have a flashback in the past of Deadpool just hanging out with Dazzler. He does it throughout the whole storyline.
Feeling better yet?
A little. Anyways, yes. I love the covers here. These are covers done by Mark Brooks. Yep. So aside from dealing with what goes on, and of course you have Nova. I believe this is supposed to be his head Alexander. He goes off to deal with what he's flying off to deal with his tie-in issues for his own book. Yep. So for these next several issues, you have Deadpool team up with Dazzler in the past, and of course, Deadpool's wife basically is worried about him. And of course, you have Eleanor, where she just basically just does research on his stuff. Yeah. It's surprising though Deadpool was actually not at the Truth Bomb incident. I would think he probably was, but nope. Eleanor was. And then she finds out about the little girl. Emma calls me Ellie. Yep. And she meets her daughter for the first time in this story arc. Oh yeah, and she basically chats her for a while. Oh yeah, and the little girl, she's a big fan of Deadpool. Wait till she finds out later on that her father is in fact Deadpool. Yep. Yeah. So then we have Ultimatum show up. Yeah, they're a terrorist organization from Marvel Comics. And in case you're wondering, is Leader Flag Smasher here? Yes. And of course, Eleanor herself basically just smashing through, like, Ultimatum terrorists. And of course, gets her face exposed. Deadpool does something in the past, like going to the back of the building, goes to his Dr. Jacob Sanatorium, tries to seize Tony Stark, goes to Avengers Mansion, where he runs into Thor. It's of course set in the 70s, because of course it is. And we have Deadpool just going to this other place. Okay, sure, does Deadpool meet Ellie? Yes, she does. Well, he does anyways. Yep. And of course, Eleanor is just... I was a little girl. I'm trying to think what was her name. And he, of course, comes back to present after basically time traveling. He ends up fighting, well, Ultimatum. Dazzler fights a bunch of, well, monsters. Then he apparently sets fire to appears to be his parents' house. Oh yeah, and it turns out that this old man really wanted... he was told by his brother to keep her away from Deadpool. The reason why is because Deadpool is her father. Yep. So after smashing through the Ultimatum, of course, apparently she has no problem with blood and guts. And here's Flag Smasher. No, this is not the original one. This is just some other guy they basically pointed as Flag Smasher. I believe Deadpool killed him. Yes. And then we have apparently... Deadpool gets some help from Evan, who is kind of Deadpool's adopted son. Like, basically, he's his guardian. Yeah, this is actually otherwise known as Kid Apocalypse. He decides to help out because he wanted to. And of course, the S.H.I.E.L.D. agent got her skin back. And of course they deal with some of the aftermath stuff. And of course then we have issue 34, which basically is just, Deadpool in the 90s. Where the artwork itself is not drawn by Rob Liefeld, but it's done Robert Liefeld style. This artwork here is done by Scott Kublish, but it's done in the style of Rob Liefeld, one of his co-creators. Where basically he meets up with Sabretooth. Then he runs into Alpha Flight. Yes, Alpha Flight. Basically the version that existed back in the 90s. And he, of course, fights them along with Sabretooth. And then he meets up and he just burns down the house. And then, of course, eventually he gets back to the present. Where basically Deadpool's hanging out with her, basically bonding really well. And then, of course, I can tell Scott Ascent, don't ever let Deadpool know that he's the father of this little girl. Yep, and that's pretty much the end of Gerry Duggan's run for Deadpool. And can you believe it all started with this here? Yeah, this is where it started. These two story arcs right here. And then, of course, it continued with Deadpool versus S.H.I.E.L.D. There's also the time travel stuff, which later led to this stuff here. A lot of really good stuff Gerry Duggan does. Even the relaunch of the book. Yeah, because when I think of Deadpool in the last several years, I think of this run. And it's by far one of the best runs ever in the history of Marvel Comics. Well, in the last decade. And here's a fun fact for you. His run for Deadpool started the same year as Jason Aaron's run for Thor. And ended just before his run ended. I believe it was just a year prior to Jason Aaron's run for Thor. Because, Gerry Duggan's run ended with issue 300 of Deadpool, when it was renamed to Despicable Deadpool. Where they basically, when they restored the temporary numbering, they included the original volume, which was 16 issues. And here's a surprise, though. Did they include Agent X? No, they did not include Agent X part of the numbering. The next numbering they included was Cable and Deadpool. And then Deadpool Volume 2, 3, 4, and then, of course, they led to the regular issues themselves. Of course, after Gerry Duggan left the book, we had two writers come after him. First was Scotty Young, whose run lasted for 15 issues. And then we had Kelly Thompson go over, and her run was 10 issues. I don't really know why in the world these books had to end when they did. I thought that was kind of dumb. But yeah, in the case of Gerry Duggan's run itself, it's awesome. So that means the only runs left to go for Deadpool are just Volume 1 and 2. And Cable and Deadpool. Okay? So yeah, that's that particular review. I have roughly 1 or 2 more videos left to do today. One, of course, be Deadpool. The other one will be a review for, not Deadpool, Doctor Who. And maybe our comic order? Maybe, okay? Next video. Bye.